Welcome to today's meeting of the Accounts Commission, which is being held in Edinburgh. Public session for today is being recorded as normal, and the recording will be made available via the Accounts Commission's website as soon as possible, and is available on request in the interim. Members of the public are also welcome to observe the public session of the Commission meeting on the day. Those who are watching this morning, thank you for taking the time to join us. You are here to observe, however, and not to participate, and therefore your camera and microphone are off. I'd like to say I could welcome Rob Simpson. I'm expecting her to be joining us from Aberdeenshire Council, but has not yet made it here. I suspect it might be something to do with the train problems in Edinburgh today. And I appreciate his attempt to come here, given the council's having a full meeting, which we are departing with, so apologies for that too. I'd also like to welcome colleagues from Aberdeenshire Council who are watching online, and along with Commercial Manager and Stirling IGB colleagues who are watching online today. Thank you for taking the time, because I know this is a busy period for you all. Please note that the meeting chat function is not in use. If you experience any technical issues, please contact our support colleagues separately via Teams or by email to the address given in the calendar invite. Commission members, please ensure you keep your camera on and throughout the meeting, but keep your microphone on mute. For others participating in the meeting online, please keep your camera off and your microphone on mute, except when it is your item. Coming now to item 1, apologies for absence. Sarah?
No apologies for absence, Chair.
Item 2 then is declarations of connections. Can I ask any members who have any connection or interest regarding any items on today's agenda to please state the connection or interest and whether they consider it material enough to keep them to need to recuse themselves from the meeting. So, Carol?
I'd like to declare a interest because I'm on another professional body that gets audited when we start talking about the procurement and audit, but I don't see material, so I can stay in the room.
Jennifer?
The same as Carol.
Angela?
And 2 connections. One in relation to item 6, the 102 report. I've previously worked with the Club Manager, and in relation to the procurement, I'm a member of another public.
Nicola?
Also, same as Jennifer and Carol for item 13 on FPAM. I'm sit on the board of Medical Welfare Commission, which is an auditing body.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Item 5, Aberdeenshire Council. I was employed as Head of Finance for Aberdeenshire from about 2000 to 2011. The last couple of years have been as a Section 95 officer. I think it's probably sufficiently long since I left there. There's nothing, but just to note that. And also item 6, Club Manager Stirling as an ex-employee of Club Manager Council and resident within Club Manager. But again, I'm just really recording that. I don't believe it's material enough to exclude myself from the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Transparency statement for item 5 and 11 as a council taxpayer from Aberdeenshire. I don't believe it's material, so it'll remain in the meeting. And the usual one is item 13 for the FPAM as a member of another body.
So that then takes us to item 3, order of business. As normal, I'd like to seek the Commission's approval for the order of business today. I propose that we consider items 10 to 15 in private, the reasons sent out on the agenda. Our members agreed. So item 4, minutes of matters arising from the previous meeting. Sarah?
Thanks, Chair. There were 3 actions arising from the last meeting. The first was in relation to the diversity and equality data for the Commission. We've checked that and members have been sent an update on that. Members had sought an update on Scottish Government's additional support for learning review. There isn't any information yet, but Joe Chapman will keep members updated as information comes through. And finally, members have asked about the Commission's health and social care performance data that was published in February, and just maybe ensuring that we keep public awareness and sector awareness of that. And our communications group, on which Nicola and Ruth sit, will be meeting either later this month or early April to discuss that and progress work in relation to that. I'm happy to take any comments or questions on the minute.
Any errors, omissions? Agree to approve the minute. So that takes us then to one of the substantial items for today's public session of the Commission, which is the best value in Aberdeenshire Council. This is a statutory report by the Controller of Audit of Best Value on Aberdeenshire Council. The report draws attention to the findings from the Council's 24-25 annual audit report and how effectively it demonstrates best value. The Commission is invited to consider and endorse the Controller's report in this session. We will then consider later in private how we wish to proceed. The Controller and the Auditor are here to provide any clarifications or answers to questions that members may have, both the Controller's report and the annual audit report as it relates to best value. Welcome both. Helena, hand over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. And I welcome the opportunity to discuss my best value report and Aberdeenshire Council with the Commission this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by Mark from Grant Thornton, and my thanks to him and the audit team for all of their work on the audit reports that are here before us today. As my report highlights, Aberdeenshire Council demonstrates a continued commitment to delivering best value. It has improved how it articulates its strategic priorities, which are now set out in its new council plan approved in June 2024, which is clear, concise, and includes outcome and performance indicators. Auditors concluded that the council's overall governance arrangements are effective and enable transparent decision-making, and auditors have consistently reported positively on the council's community engagement activities. The council has appropriate performance management arrangements in place to monitor and report on progress against its priorities, although auditors have highlighted that the presentation of key performance information could be improved to enable easier comparison between performance and targets. In terms of service level performance, auditors have highlighted, using local government benchmark framework indicators, that there has been a good level of improvement since base year, but in the most recent year, more indicators declined than improved. Like many councils, Aberdeenshire is facing a significant future budget gap, and my report highlights that our analysis suggests that when taken as a percentage of total revenue budgets, Aberdeenshire's budget gap is one of the largest in Scotland. The latest figure, which has been updated since my report as part of the budget discussions, is that this gap sits at 92.48 million to 2029-30. This figure is before any potential additional costs from the integrated joint board are considered, which is also facing a significant funding gap. It's also important to highlight that the council's usable reserves are also relatively low in comparison to peer authorities. The council approved its transformation strategy in November 2023, which is subsequently updated this January, which sets out a vision for whole organisation change, with projects helping to create future financial sustainability, supported by a transformation reserve. At the time of the audit, a number of projects were underway, but most were still at an early stage, and auditors highlighted inconsistencies in how expected financial and non-financial benefits have been qualified, and the need for a systematic mechanism by which progress in realising savings can be monitored. The council has not clearly set out savings for each theme or project, nor the timeline for achieving them. And in light of the significant financial pressures ahead, the council urgently needs to progress its transformation work, ensuring itself that it has clarity on its impacts, financial and non-financial, that planned savings are monitored and delivered, and that the plans are sufficiently ambitious to meet the challenges ahead. Pause there for Mark and I'll do our best to answer any questions.
Thank you. Can I just remind everyone that the sound effects are all great today, so if we speak loudly so that it gets caught in the recording. Thank you. Okay. As is normally the case, we have kind of organised our questioning around a number of lines of interest to us, a number of themes, and I will ask each a lead question under each theme to start us off. So under overarching issues, I'll ask Carol to start us off.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. And it's really good to see that the council in general seems to be well run and meeting its performance and improvement overall. But that kind of leads to my question, because there seems to be a disconnect with the seemingly very well run council and the lack of progress on the transformation which you've highlighted, which is essential for the savings that they need going forward. So really my questions are around that. So there's a lot of actions that they had that had been identified in the audit that had January 26 end date. So it's just to understand the progress made, whether they were realistic, and given that the transformation seems to have been suspended due to the IJB financial pressures, whether those deadlines for January have actually been met, whether the transformation is now moving at the pace it needs to. And also there seems to be a disconnect between the governance of projects in the transformation space versus not in the transformation space. So it'd be understand whether why that is, and whether the higher level of governance is slowing the transformation down, or whether actually the other ones are just not following best practice. So to get an understanding there. And then also why really the savings haven't been made in the last year, and whether you expect they have the ability to make the savings in the year coming. Thank you.
There was a lot within that, and I'll attempt to cover off a broad level and bring Mark in to cover some of the specifics. I think overall, as you've outlined, and just on that governance point more generally, overall, the auditors have concluded that the council is well governed and has an understanding of what is happening across its services, and that where it's identified areas of challenge, such as the IJB is working with colleagues there. I think in terms of the governance and oversight of the transformation programme itself, the council has a programme management office which reports to the Director of Business Services. It's got 5 different transformation themes, and each of those is led by a chief officer, then has a strategic change board with the chief exec and directors of finance. So there is clearly a governance structure around that transformation work. But I think the issue that the auditors have highlighted is the lack of that performance data and how that is presented, and then the challenges that the council have had to set out the impact, both the financial and the non-financial, to enable that success measures to be monitored and tracked. And I think that's an area auditors have highlighted. And while there is a RAG rating that is presented as part of the project management information, it's not clear on what basis those judgments are made. So those are all areas where the team have made recommendations for improvement. And I'll give Mark a moment to come in and say whether those recommendations have yet been taken forward. I think just to clarify on the transformation reserve, that was, as we highlighted, that was suspended while the financial challenges presented by the IJB were addressed. As I'm sure we'll come on to later, those challenges have improved. The position of the IJB has improved, and that suspension has now been lifted. But Mark, do you want to come in and talk a little bit more about the progress that has been made against those recommendations, and then particularly a little bit more about the savings and the progress that has been made around those as well?
It's an interesting question, Commissioner. So the councils are just large, complex organisations, aren't they? So I don't think it's I don't think you can equate sort of they're not successful in a particular area to they're not being well governed. So, you know, my overall impression of Aberdeenshire is that it is well governed and tends to take the right decisions, and importantly for me, takes to responds appropriately to challenge. So if I'm kind of raising issues there, they listen and they respond. I think perhaps on transformation, it's perhaps their Achilles heel in terms of their being able to transform the council. Now, that's not that different to most councils that I work with. To be candid, these are difficult programs to actually deliver. I mean, it requires quite a lot of corporate support, as well as sort of directorates being willing to actually change. It's not that Aberdeenshire haven't done anything. There are a couple of projects that we highlight in terms of digital and children's homes that they've focused on. I know they're looking at schools as well, in terms of, well, how do they get to the right number of schools? Obviously, that requires
a level of consultation. Now, that being said, I think they recognise that this isn't sort of the area that they've driven forward. So there's a revised transformation strategy that was brought in January 26. So it's very, very new. So the changing approach in terms of moving towards a more directorate-led transformation programme. So I think that's appropriate. I think that will get more buy-in in terms of what they're trying to drive forward. That's going to be supported by the Programme Management Office. There are some themes within there, some overarching work streams, which are the ones that I think we'd all expect in terms of place, sort of big digital states. So that is a challenge for them. So they did have to pause the drive for savings from transformation. That was partially due to the challenge from the IJB. So they had to allocate some reserves to the IJB because they had to underwrite its potential deficit. And I thought that was right and proper in the circumstances, because that's probably one of the biggest transformation challenges in terms of driving that forward. So I do think in some ways that they're restarting the programme, but I don't think there's a lack of ambition or a lack of recognition that that's what they need to actually do.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks, Alan and Mark, for the report and comments you've already given. I wonder if we could just follow up on Carol's point, particularly about the transformation reserve, which I think you both referenced. I mean, there's a common conundrum that I think we're seeing a clear pattern of as the Accounts Commission. You know, this is not dissimilar in some ways to the report we saw from Shetland just recently, where the council, as you said, Mark, it's been well run. There's good governance, good levels of service delivery, and the council should be commended on that. In those respects, this is a positive report. But in other ways, I think you used the phrase, Helena, significant financial pressure, one of the most acute in Scotland, and we saw in a different way the same sort of issue with Shetland, the use of reserves and being depleted very quickly. And whilst there are good things happening here, and it's important to recognise those, there's also a worrying sort of conundrum that over the medium to longer term, what's currently happening won't be sustainable. And I wonder if I could just press a little bit on the transformation reserve. It's good to hear that it's been used again, but I think paragraph 43 indicates that, in the covering report, indicates that more than 50% of it has been utilised already, and there's only £16 million or so left. I wasn't clear if in forward years there's a plan to refresh that reserve, to increase its volume and capacity to fund projects. Apologies if I missed that, but I would just welcome any sort of further information on that, just to try and give us a bit of reassurance that there's an understanding of, despite the good service levels of performance and despite the good governance issues, there's an underlying problem here if these quantums of service delivery aren't tackled in the next 3 to 5 years. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that broader point, I think, as Mark has already said as well, transformation isn't easy. It is a challenge, and we know that. And I'll be bringing forward a report soon, which looks across the piece at all of the best value transformation thematics, and we'll be able to take that more national picture. But it's not easy. I think in terms of the specifics of the transformation reserve, Mark will be able to clarify this, but I believe it's intended to be self-sustaining, with investments being made and then coming back in. I think the challenge is, as we've outlined already, is just understanding those financial benefits and the intended return. I think is probably something that's still not completely clear, but Mark might want to say a bit more on that.
Okay, thanks very much.
It's another good question, isn't it, Commissioner? I do think there's an intention to replenish those reserves, other than it will kind of, as the transformation comes through, then it will be it will go back in cycles. So, but it's not. So Aberdeenshire, I think, particularly for 26-27, have taken a different approach to kind of savings. You can see that they're looking very clearly in terms of the efficiencies that they can make where they need to disinvest. So in areas. So, but your fundamental question is, do
do councils need to continue to transform? So, and the reality is yes. But when I kind of look at what they're trying to do, so if you take the IJB, there's kind of clear plans in terms of kind of, you know, key strategic reviews of provision. And so you can see that being driven forward. But that acuteness needs, I think, now to be applied across all services. But as I said before, I don't think there's a lack of ambition or a lack of will to actually take that forward.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thanks very much.
I think also probably worth just saying, I think there are areas where they have set out the savings that they anticipate to be achieved. And I think one of the case studies within the thematic was around a work stream called Big Data, Digital and Technology, which they have estimated will generate 2.2 million savings through reduced headcount as well as non-financial benefits. I'm not sure we're quite clear on how quickly those will be achieved, though, and I think that's just where that further detail on the detail of those savings is important as they go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Jim.
Just a very specific question I wanted to pick up on about whether you can see the evidence of elected members having line of sight into the transformation programme. I noted in your report, Mark, you talked about the minutes of the council state that the councils agreed to note the progress related to the transformation activity, but you cited that you didn't see further evidence around the sort of challenge and discussion. And I just wonder if there's anything more you can say about how well involved elected members are in understanding what's being transformed, what the impact might be, and so on.
Bring Mark in to talk a bit more about what he's observed. I think, as I said at the beginning, in terms of that governance structure, we can see that elected members do get reports on this every 6 months. I believe there's a goal to move that to quarterly, but I think, as I said, it's the quality of that reporting in terms of the detail around the success measures and the progress being made against those that I think is probably where there can be improvements to. But Mark, do you want to say particularly about elected member scrutiny of those reports?
Yeah, so the council has a strategic change board, which is an oversight board by mainly officers, by chief executives, but their reports from transformation actually do go to full council and the service committee. So there is I think an opportunity for members to see what's happening. As Helen said, what we did find was that, you know, we thought they needed better information in terms of what was happening. And so sort of clearer information in terms of progress. I have to say on behalf of members, there is a level of challenge. So when I go to audit committee and I raise this, I think there's the audit chair is very clear that the council is an area the council needs to improve on. And I know there are conversations between him and chief officers.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Ruth. I was actually also going to ask about member oversight in terms of the kind of level of information that they were getting, because it was clear that arrangements around how monitoring was happening and reporting wasn't that strong. But moving on from that slightly, I wonder if you had a sense that transformation plans were sort of sufficiently ambitious to kind of address some of the financial sustainability issues that the council are facing. I didn't quite see the connection there in terms of being able to remove the kind of funding for transformation to shore up a financial issue elsewhere. How is transformation actually going to be used differently by the council going forward to address the challenges that they're facing?
And I think this is the challenge, I suppose, with the where more needs to be done to set out the intended benefits, both financial and non-financial, and then to link that to the medium-term financial strategy and the council plan. And I think in the absence of that, it becomes very difficult to offer that definitive view as to whether the ambition there will meet the financial challenges. But Mark might want to say more on that. But I also think it is also important to remember that in terms of the financial, the forecast budget gap transformation is obviously one part of that, and there's reprioritization of services, income generation as well, and all of that comes together in terms of that how they need to close that budget gap. And I think that's what they need to be setting out as part of their medium-term financial strategy.
Yeah, I think there needs to be clearer links, doesn't there? So I'm pleased that it's been relaunched. So through the strategy that went through in January, but I think there needs to be more detail. So in terms of, well, how's that going to be implemented? Sort of, do we have the capacity to implement those programs? And particularly, I think how's that going to impact on the medium-term financial strategy and the gaps there? So I think that work still has to be done.
Christine? Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Mark, for your work. So I'd like to just go back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier about the challenges of providing social care services, basically. And I know that the situation the IGB is in Aberdeenshire is not unusual in terms of the IGB landscape, and the same for the council because of that. But I'd like to look at the service changes that have been made that are really cuts under transformation. What opportunity have they taken in cutting some of the services to provide other things in a transformative way? And I recognise that's a difficult question, but it's the question that faces, and I think we're in danger of confusing savings with transformation here. So for instance, the cuts that were made to autism and ADHD diagnosis transport closure of centres last year, what alternative transformative things happened, or were they cuts?
I'll bring Mark in to talk about some of the specifics if he's able. I think, as always with this, the language is emotive and the language is difficult and important. And I think what might be one person's cuts might be another person's redesign, might be another person's transformation. And I think what's important with all of this is thinking about how the services that are being delivered and the choices that are being made support the delivery of the priorities that the council has set out and agreed in its council plan and with its community partners. And I think, as I've said before, in terms of what you define as transformation versus what you just define as measures to help balance the budget is a challenge. And we know that transformation is just one part of the picture, and there are other parts to balance the budget. But Mark, I don't know if you want to say about the assessment that was perhaps done on some of those particular services, if you're able.
As much as I can. So I should be aware. So I get to see social care across the whole country. Right. So there's not a council in the country that's not having to make difficult decisions in terms of social care. I think as a society, we need to either make the decision to fund it properly, or we're going to have to rely on our social care experts to make the decisions that they need to balance the budget for us. So I actually think Aberdeenshire's ahead of the game. So they spotted the IJB shortfall earlier, I think, than most, and have not sort of shrunk away from tackling it and have taken it head on. Now they have worked, I think, quite closely with NHS Grampian, so in terms of what they have to deliver. So the things that they've been looking at are sort of, how to redesign services. So can they improve models of care while transforming? But, to be candid, it is difficult, but they are, they have done things like the community hospital strategic review, so to kind of look at whether they can kind of shape that in a different way. So they're not unaware of the need to protect service users. So, but given the financial framework that they're working in, then there's obviously decisions that they have to make, which will impact sort of how far those services can be spread.
Can I follow up on that, George?
I think, like you, we also look across all of social care in Scotland and see the same story. So my real question is around, is it driven by savings or is it driven by transformation? Because I can't
I'm struggling with the language and I'm hoping your report in, when it comes, Helena will help me with that. Because there is opportunity here and you're right, they are ahead of the game. So if they are struggling with it, then everybody else will be too.
But okay,
Sorry.
So the,
Don't fight.
I'm used to talking, so the best ones do both, don't they?
Yeah.
So there's the financial, I suppose, framework drives transformation. And so I don't see them sat there going, oh, we're just going to cut this. So there's thought and process in terms of trying to decide, well, how can we change this service rather than just take the service away.
Thank you. That's helpful. That's really where I was going to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got very much.
Yeah.
Well,
we did.
Sorry, Helen.
Well, I think the only thing I would, I'd add on that is, it's not, transformation is a not neat linear thing. It's always easy to put something into a box. And I think one of the things that you did highlight was that there were areas where the council were taking forward work around schools, which actually weren't captured as part of the transformation work, but were clearly also transformative. So I think there, as part, I suppose, I hope of the work that the council's done to review its transformation strategy, is thinking about it in the wider sense of the work that is happening and where things like that might be happening outside of the transformation programme at the moment. They'll be looking at how it captures the breadth of the work going on.
I'm going to move on from transformation unless anybody has a burning question. Angela.
Joe, just a very quick question, and it is really in terms of positioning. It strikes me from the report and from reading other reports that that have been presented to council that Aberdeenshire has quite challenge in terms of demographics, and that their awareness of the changes in their demography is driving a lot of the either change or transformation. I'm just wondering whether as auditors you concur with that.
I think there's probably a sensible.
I was going to say, it's just a really short answer. So absolutely, the change in demographics, I have some statistics here, but I can't quite find them. But the change in sort of over 65s, for example, is significant in Aberdeenshire. So because it's obviously a beautiful place to live and a great place to retire. So, but equally, there's a significant change in sort of school numbers in terms of kind of people kind of working there because, so a lot of the work's around Aberdeen. So in terms of kind of the oral sort of structures there. And so, but those changes that increase, we're all getting a little older, aren't we? We're all living a little longer. They're significant for Aberdeenshire in terms of the cost and the and what it's going to have to deal with in terms of social care going forward.
Any questions under the section for opposite?
Yeah, so I've got another question around the impact assessments. It looked like from the report that these were done quite late on. So to me, it felt like they weren't embedded. So I'd really like to understand why these are not embedded, why they're not considered work along with all the other things. And does this mean, is the council then committed to making sure there's no unintended consequences for protected groups? And also it talked about the members not being given enough evidence to make decisions around that kind of impact assessment. So it was really, are they in any breach of their kind of impact duties here, and how are people with protected characteristics being accommodated really through the council plans?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll make a general remark of first off and then come on to the transformation piece. So I think as part of the earlier work on the best value thematic on leadership, this was an area that was also looked at. And I think in that space, auditors concluded that when the council is taking key decisions undertaken by committees, they are required to produce an integrated impact assessment alongside the report to be considered. And from a review of committee minutes and meetings, auditors were able to see evidence of that integrated impact assessment. So I don't think there's a point of wider concern. I think the point that they did make, though, was that the minutes noted that the impact assessment had to be considered as part of the report. There wasn't much by way of recording of the discussion to be able to evidence the extent to which it had been discussed. And I think that's an area where they felt that the minutes could be improved to the evidence of that. I think in terms of transformation, particularly, so business cases are required for the transformation programme, are required to produce that integrated impact assessment so that there is that clear appreciation of the impact on changes on residents and those with protected characteristics. But I think this comes back to the point that not all of the work that the council is doing is captured within that transformation programme. So I mentioned the recent school estate rationalisation, which has transformation elements, isn't captured within the transformation programme. And now that's not to say that there's anything untoward in terms of a breach there, but I think it's just that it's not being captured as part of the programme, so the impact assessments aren't being captured as part of that, which I think there will be benefits in doing. But I think generally, I think the auditors have been comfortable with the impact assessment programme.
Just to confirm what Helen said, I don't think that anymore. I'm not, the council's aware of its social impact duties and, the reports that I read cover sort of what I would expect in general. So I'm not aware of any.
Thank you. I was interested to know that hybrid home working is now fully embedded, but the report also states that office rationalisation is making slow progress forward from my voice. I just wondered if you could say any more of why that slow progress is there and is it likely to pick up?
I'll bring Mark in as well. I suppose, like many employers, hybrid working has obviously left the council with more office space than it currently requires. And I believe there was a recommendation in the workforce thematic to ensure that the links are being made between the workforce strategy, medium-term financial strategy, transformation strategy, to bring all of this together in terms of how it uses its estates and others assets. And obviously this is something that we will be coming back to as well as part of the asset management work. But Mark, I don't know if you want to say more about the options that the council has explored and the progress that it's been making.
Yeah, it's a problem for the public sector, isn't it? Because I think we're all in offices, weren't we, kind of pre-COVID, and then suddenly all those investments seem a little naive. So, and we have quite a lot of vacant space, whether you're in the public sector or private sector, to be candid. So, and I think there lies the issue. So Aberdeenshire, I think, has explored the opportunities to with its estate utilise it better. So post implementation of hybrid working. So, but there's quite a long time lag to kind of work with public sector partners to get them into the office. I think there is some opportunities now at Woodhill House, which is the main sort of office in Aberdeenshire. So I know there's conversations with the police and the NHS. I think on the other estate, it's finding businesses that are willing to actually move in. So, and where they can actually sell to. So I think there's, there is more to be done. So, but I think the council has made a good start on it, but it still has, I suppose, to improve its utilisation of this estate.
So, thank you.
Any other questions on transformation plan? If it takes us into finance, and I would ask Eric Legal.
Thanks, Chair. Wonderful to start this because I'm conscious that what you've had the initial focus and questions around about transformation, and that's probably a big focus on finance as well. So I don't want to repeat questions that have been before, but I suppose an overarching question is how concerned should we as a Commission be about the medium long-term financial sustainability of Aberdeenshire Council? Now, and every council is facing the same financial challenge, and we're well cited on this. From your report, I was concerned that the council was perhaps not in such as good a place as some others are to address that. And there's 4 areas that are probably giving me concern. A couple of them we've covered already, transformation. So as I said, I don't want to repeat that, but I was concerned in your report when it talked about in terms of balancing decisions taken to balance the budget, there's figures put in for transformation and nothing was achieved. So I suppose it's part of that going forward, that 92.4 million figure you mentioned, Helena. What, if any, assumptions were made about transformation related savings to achieve that? What confidence can we take that, having failed in the past, can the council actually deliver on that? I think you also mentioned the question of reserves, and there's a proposal then to restore reserves. Again, the big question mark for me is, given the financial gap, how confident that we can be that the council can build up the reserves again. IJBs, again, I took a bit of comfort from the current year update that the actual IJB is forecasting an underspend, but given that there's no reserves and there's a call in the council and health budget, again, I wonder about the confidence you have that that improved position can be sustained. And my final point, a more specific question, is round about capital. Your report highlights seem to be a recurring issue of underspends in capital, which again is something that we're seeing elsewhere. But balanced against that, I noted a proposal for the council to increase its capital investment, understandably, but talking about a ceiling of 8.5%. I'm wondering how that figure was arrived at, because I think from the benchmark information we've done, that's again, it's at the higher end of proportions of debt. So again, given that long-term financial projection of real pressures on its revenue budget, can it afford that level of capital investment? What does that mean for the council if it can't deliver on it? So there's a few questions there that I'm trying to get some reassurances that the council is going to manage that medium longer term financial.
I mean, it's not in doubt. I don't think that, you know, that there are significant challenges as there are for many, but as it's in my opening remarks, it feels like the relative position is particularly challenging. I think you talked about the track record in delivering savings, and I think one of the things that the audit team did highlight is that there isn't that process for managing and tracking delivery of savings beyond the eventual under or overspend against the budget for the year. And the audit team made a recommendation that the council should not apply general savings in its budget, and instead that all savings should be clearly set out so that performance can be tracked. Mark might want to say a bit more about this, but I think the budget, the 26-27 budget that has just been approved, did include specific service savings of 9.254 million in line with the auditor's recommendation. There were no general savings. So I think that that hopefully can demonstrate, give some comfort in that those savings are now identified and progress will be monitored. Mark will come in and talk a bit more about the reserves position, as well as you noted, the council has made a commitment to continue to set aside to grow its reserves, but that will obviously be challenging in light of the challenges that it has faced. And in terms of capital, again, I'll bring Mark in to talk about the cap that the council has agreed, but as you've noted, they have predicted and underspent. That is something that the sector more generally, we've had a number of discussions around the challenges around capital spend and the cost pressures, the resourcing pressures, and the need to they're not alone in having to navigate that. I think a large part of that has been a focus around the Peterhead community campus as well, which they are in the process of developing a new strategy to address, and Mark might want to say a bit more about that. Why don't we address those and then we'll come back to the IJB point as well.
I'll try and wrap it all together to how we'll see. So we see a lot of financial sustainability issues. So it's kind of it's the thing we look at most. So it was auditors now, whether it's Aberdeenshire, elsewhere, and while it's a big figure, then Aberdeenshire's a big council. So I think you have to kind of put everything in into perspective in terms of, well, you know, what's the council trying to achieve. Now, if I look at Aberdeenshire on a yearly basis, then it delivers, to be candid. So if you look at 24 to 2025, it was there or thereabouts. It's sort of like was in sort of 4 million. You didn't have to draw from reserves. At that point, I was we had conversations about them drawing from reserves. But if you look at 5-6, then despite the IJB pressures, then they're within £1 million of hitting their budget, which is, you know, a fantastic achievement. So, and they will put some more money back into reserves, and then they have made sensible decisions for 6-7. So, you know, the commissioners' comments around sort of cuts and so on, but they are making appropriate decisions in terms of where they prioritise their spend, and they are disinvesting where they have to. So the budget for 6-7 is actually balanced, and they've actually managed to put additional funding into the IJB to actually, you know, put that back to solvency, and they have worked very hard with NHS Grampian to secure them funding the IJP as well. So they invariably make the right decisions to keep themselves financially sustainable. So in terms of, well, we discussed transformation, so I'm not going to say anything more on transfer of information. So, you know, we all now kind of recognise that's an area for them to, I think, to focus on, like, going forward. In terms of savings, a lot of the under delivery was around transformation. So, but then they found other savings. If I look at 5-6, they'll deliver 21 million of their 28 million savings, and then they'll find other savings elsewhere to get them back to balance. So they, you know, the conversations I have show sensible outcomes and rigor in terms of the responses they're making to the various issues. Reserves, I think reserves are a little low, to be candid. So they're about 88 million. Of that, there's about going 29 million, which is either working reserves or risk-based reserves, and then there's obviously the money available for transformation. So can they survive a shock? Yes, they can. Can they survive multiple shocks? To be tested, I think. But, you know, you could look across the country and name any number of councils who are in the same position. Do I believe they will build back? They've been successful so far. They've got an extra 2 million in for this year. They have a clear in the budget. They've got an extra 4 million going in for 6-7. So, and then they've got build back from there. So I find them quite a determined bunch in terms of when they say this is what we're going to do, then they do tend to deliver it. We've had quite a lot of conversations on capital, to be candid, because I thought the initial capital programme wasn't sustainable. So where we've got to is that they've put in the cap, which is sort of 8.5%. They actually tend to be below the cap. So basically it's if you took their net revenue budget, what portion of the net revenue budget are you actually willing to put towards capital schemes? So, and they've capped that at 8.5%, which roughly works out at 40 to 50 million pounds a year in interest payments. So it's quite a lot. So, and the capital borrowing that you're seeing is affordable within that cap. So as long as they stay within the cap, then I'm not uncomfortable with where they are. But they've been quite clear in their capital strategy to members, then it's almost one in, one out. So if you want a different capital project, then you have to take something out. And again, you know, my impression of them is that they're very sensible in terms of kind of going, well, this is what we can do. We have to cut our cloth to the finances that are available. So do I believe they'll cover off the long-term deficit? That depends on a myriad of things, doesn't it? I think if it lies within their gift, then yes. If government funding changes substantially, so then that's not a negative. So, but if it's in their gift, then yes, I think they will make it financially sustainable.
No, that's true. I mean, I know Helen, a minute, I quoted the 92.4. I think the concern is it was the percentage of the council's overall budget, which is something that we look at across all 32 councils. Some of that level of 8.5 is quite high compared to other councils. So there's no right or wrong answer, but just trying to get the right bit.
No,
There's
good
some
question.
reassurances
Yeah,
and thank you.
The IGB,
Yeah.
The IGB, well, I can cover the IGB again. So the IGB will continue to add pressure to the council. I think by 29, 30, the overall pressure something around 30 million. So, but I do believe they grasp the IJB perhaps ahead of what other councils have. But I do wonder whether this will be a conversation for you with other bodies as they come forward. So they've changed the leadership of the IJB. They've certainly changed their governance. If we look back to 2023, it was calling decisions by the audit committee that kind of raised the IJB issue, and then they've been kind of working on it since with NHS Grampian. So it remains a risk because social care, NHS is a demand-led service, isn't it? So that's the dilemma of our age. So, but they are working hard to make that work.
Mike?
Yeah, we've been over much of this ground already, but put crudely, it looks as if the council needs to save basically around 5% a year, if you include the IJB, over a 4 or 5 year period. And that does feel challenging, reassured by the comments about the grouping here. Two questions against that background. First question really is the transformation process going to be able to deliver to the pace of savings needed, or are they going to have to make short-term measures? And secondly, they have a very good, you've been very positive about their community engagement activity. With that extent of change, how far, as it were, have they prepared their citizens for that degree of change?
So I think on that, I'll bring Mark on the community engagement in particular, but I think going back to that question, I think we have probably gone around that ground already in terms of will transformation deliver the savings at the pace that it's needed. And I think, as we've already said, there are a range of things that need to happen to manage that gap transformation and that work that they need to do to articulate the benefits they anticipate realising from the transformation programme and bringing that into the medium-term financial strategy. But there are other things that they are that they need to do that they are looking at as well in terms of income generation and service prioritisation. But Mark, do you want to say something about community engagement in particular?
Yeah, so just to deal with 5%, because I always have to answer questions. So I think that's it. Say 5% is not that uncommon in my experience. I know it's a big figure. So can councils deliver 5%? Yes, if they transform. Do Aberdeenshire need to make sure that they're transforming? Yes, they do. So because that's the only way. You literally have to look at it service by service, go back to base budget, and then go, well, what are we going to change? Now they have started that process. The first time they did that was 6-7, but they will need to continue that as they move forward. So I think they have a good record on community engagement. If you look back on the leadership report that we did, so the council plan was well discussed with the community. The priorities were based on where the community wanted them to place the money, but I think they will have to do that again. So because some of these changes will impact on some of the services that they can provide, but they are they're very much work to place in Aberdeenshire and kind of look at the impact of what they do on each area, because it's such a diverse area and such a widespread geographical area. So but I do have confidence that they will take that forward through the committee structure that they have to make sure that they are talking to the community. But it will be challenging, no doubt.
I pick up one item in your report around the Ness Energy Facility and the extent to which, as you say, the council need to ensure an appropriate agreement is reached in the EFW facility if it's to avoid a negative impact on its medium-term financial strategy. So that negative impact, is it a contingent liability? Is it quantified? Is it, how likely is it to be?
It's just the energy from waste. Yeah, so well, they're already on that journey in terms of where they've got to. I don't, if you don't mind, I'm happy to go into more detail in the private session. So, but some of this,
I need to understand the issues around that bit
So-
public.
yeah. So, but obviously,
What you can share publicly. That's
yeah, okay. So obviously the contract was let, so the supplier has withdrawn from the contract. So there's obviously some legal implications to deal with that. In terms of the cost to the council, it's something like £2 million per annum is the additional cost they're paying to the interim supplier. That service then needs to be relet. So, and then hopefully that cost will.
To the extent to which that the contingent liability on their balance sheet is not clear at the moment, and it doesn't necessarily feed through into their financial projections for medium term.
So I don't think it would beyond the additional service cost. I don't think there will be a particularly negative impact on the balance sheet.
Just it's a quite start state.
Yeah. No, it's fine. So we're always cautious of auditors, aren't we? We always like to have things contingent liabilities just in case. But my, our understanding grows, and I don't think it's going to have significant impact.
Okay, that's very good. I think that takes us on to leadership and governance. Malcolm.
Chair, yeah, my question was going to be around elected members scrutiny. To be honest, I think that's been adequately covered. So thanks.
Anybody else want to pick up? Angela?
I just ask in terms of the political leadership. There have been several changes in the leadership over the last few years. And I wonder to what extent that is limiting longer term planning and the follow through of priorities.
I'll let you come in and share your observations.
So not at all in my experience, because I think it's coalition governance, then it can be difficult. It can be difficult for difficult decisions to be made. And I suppose the test for me was whether the difficult decisions would be made for the 6-7 budget, because that's when these things tend not to work. But that didn't happen. The 6-7 budget is a sensible budget in terms of agreeing to disinvest, and so I've not seen any tension. Certainly officers aren't reporting to me any kind of difficulties in how that coalition's working.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I pick up the area of risk? So just a different theme for us. And I think Aberdeenshire has had more than its fair share of incidents had to deal with recently, from seaside flooding to the big snowfalls earlier in the winter. I think it certainly seems to, from observing from outside, manage that risk particularly well, and has developed expertise. Perhaps didn't want to develop that expertise, but they appear to have done so, where significant numbers of their citizens have been affected. So if we look at the internal audit regime, and internal auditors, and obviously linked to use an external auditor and internal, I'm particularly interested around the areas of limited assurance. I think there's 7 that are highlighted in the report there. Some of them, I think, would obviously affect a lot of people. Self-directed care, children with disabilities. Can you just give us some sense of around that limited assurance? Should we be concerned around that? Is that something that's going to bite big time, or are you happy that they've got the necessary in place?
Yeah, I mean, I'll bring in Mark, and as the report concluded that from the auditor's views that there were no significant gaps in the assurances that were obtained by the audit committee, and that they had an effective framework for considering that. But I don't know if you want to go through some of the specifics that he considered.
It's fine. So Internal Audit issued about 31 reports, so which you right, Commissioner, so the seven kind of highlighted sort of areas of risk. Some so this is why I think Aberdeenshire's strong. So, you know, when it sets the plan, it literally points internal audit to the areas that it thinks they're going to find challenges in, so they can take the learning and actually kind of like move on. And to be candid, that's a good council, in my experience. It's the councils where they kind of do like repeat reviews that never look at anything difficult, and then have kind of everything just seems nice, but perhaps isn't. So I think internal audit are suitably challenged. If you look at the children's disability one, I won't go through them all, but it kind of highlights sort of issues around lack of documentation and central records, delay in planned completion. So sometimes approval limits being exceeded. So that could be anywhere, council, to be honest. So lots of councils struggle with that kind of children's social care aspect, but it's the response that matters to me. So the audit committee wasn't happy with that, and actually referred that into the scrutiny process, and the education departments had to write a formal report on how it's going to how it's going to improve. So I think internal audit are rightly challenging. So there's nothing in there that they flagged to me in terms of fraud or anything that would undermine the governance. Certainly their overall internal audit report was a clean one. So but what they're doing is rightly challenging the council to get better.
Anything else under leadership and governance? This is to partnership working. Randall.
Thank you. So you've already covered the effective working that there is with the Grampian Health Board. So I wondered, the report would suggest that there are other partnerships in play, but maybe not as extensive as you might have thought. Could you just elaborate a bit on where the partnerships are strong, and how that is supporting the financial sustainability of the council?
Yeah, I'll bring up because you've got some of the detail of the different partnerships that are underway.
Yeah, so it's one thing they could do more here, to be candid. So the partnerships that we see, so they have a joint internal audit function with sort of Aberdeen City and some of the IJBs. There's a joint insurance service with Aberdeen City, and then there's various kind of support on strategies and peer reviews and collaborations, but they're all I think are at the margins. So I think there's perhaps more that can be done in terms of partnerships. So whether that's in terms of I don't know, to take forward children's social care, or on shared IT systems, or even on shared finance functions, then I think there's more to be done there. But I do think there's the appetite so to do that, but they do have to prioritise. So they have to decide what they're going to do first, and I would much prefer they focused on transformation.
Thank you.
Just to kind of build on that, because I noted that in the controllers report, paragraph 47, there's listed up the areas where they do work in partnerships. So there's things like procurement, which I think is with Highland Council, planning, internal audit, and then in the BV thematic, there is the comment that there's little evidence of partnership working, and I just wondered if that was perhaps been a little harsh. Given that there seemed to be between the two.
No, so I can be a little harsh. So, but that's okay. So I'm also that's fine. So I see these things in terms of the financial challenge. So what's fundamentally going to change whether Aberdeenshire is financially sustainable, and these won't change that answer. So these are things that are at the margins in terms of how councils should operate, and so I don't, it's a good list, isn't it? So, but will this fundamentally change how services are delivered to the public? Will it fundamentally change the financial position of Aberdeenshire?
I think it comes down to that point around that transformation piece, isn't it, really, and the scale and the size and the ambition. If the question is, do Aberdeenshire have partnerships, then I think we can point to, yes, they do. But is there, as with across so many and across the sector more generally, and as we've discussed in other fora and in relation to others, is there a need to look more widely at the opportunities around, given the scale of the challenges? Then I think, yes. And I think that applies to so many there as well.
Christine.
Just a quick question on partnership working. One of the partnerships that's not mentioned, I didn't expect it to be, but it's particularly important to Aberdeenshire, given the context and the demographics of the AVP, the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership. How strong is that partnership, in your opinion?
You finally asked a question I can't answer. So I would have to go away and have a look at that, but I'm not going to give you.
I'd be interested in your response if you don't mind. No, thank you.
I'll go have a look at that.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mark or Helena? You've given us plenty of food for thought. Thank you both. And we will return to this in a private session. Now.
A release. Yeah, see you later. Thank you very much.
Short break.
Thank you.
Thank you.